So no mai harimai. Welcome to our NDF online session, getting started with digital preservation with our presenter, Tim Barnett, team leader of digital research collections at Auckland Council Libraries. So this is the first in a series of co-created webinars with Auckland Council Libraries, and it's really exciting having them on board to bring new ideas and angles to NDF as a CODI member. So ko Valerie Love Tokulingua, my name is Valerie Love, and I am the Senior Digital Archivist at Te Kunamataranga o Aotearoa, the National Library of New Zealand, and I am also an NDF board member. So before we hand over to Tim, just a few housekeeping notes. To keep the session running smoothly, we ask that you keep yourself muted and keep cameras off so the focus can be on the speaker. The session will be recorded, so you will have a chance to review, and we will share the recording and links to any resources mentioned by email in the next few days. And your questions and comments are most welcome. So please feel free to use the chat feature and ask any questions, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So we are really excited to welcome Tim Barnett as our presenter for today. And Tim is currently Team Leader Digital Research Collections at Auckland Council Libraries, and he's been with Auckland Libraries for 10 years, implementing a new collection management system, Content DM, and also setting up their digital preservation workflow. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Tim. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Val. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So the topic for today is digital preservation and storage, or perhaps more appropriately, digital storage. And let's get this to advance. These are the topics I'm going to touch on, but will probably range all over the place. Getting support from your IT team, if you have one, figuring out what you have and where it is, and what hardware and software considerations, and planning for the future. So jumping right in, I really recommend that you look at Val's and Martin's webinar on Digital Preservation Theory 101. I'm not going to go over all of the technical things they covered there, talking more about how we follow their advice and implement what they've recommended in that webinar. So I'll be covering some of the same topics, but looking at how here at Auckland Libraries we've approached those issues. So digital preservation, a series of managed activities necessary to ensure the continued access to digital materials for as long as necessary. When you look at all the definitions of digital preservation, the underlying message really is that ensuring the long-term accessibility of digital content requires ongoing active stewardship. It goes without saying, it's not like putting a book on a library shelf. You have to be keeping your eyes on this stuff all the time. The best place to go for information is Digital Preservation Coalition. They are really fabulous. The materials that are here will really help you a lot. So I can't recommend that highly enough. Another really good thing to look at is this document by Scott Prater. Although it's from 2018, it's still really pertinent. It really explains how to talk to your IT department. And a lot of what I'm talking about today really splits into two categories. Those of you who've got an IT department that you work with, this is about how to get support that you need from the IT department and how to collaborate with them. And then we'll also look at, for those of you who are in smaller collecting institutions where if you don't have an IT department, how do you go about doing this yourself? Now, there are some things that led to a lot of confusion for us, and these are outlined in Scott's document. We don't talk about backups with our IT department. We talk about needing preservation copies because they've got a whole backup system in place and it doesn't meet preservation needs. It's really for business continuity. Similarly, we don't talk about digital asset management, needing a dam. We talk about needing a digital preservation system. And when you ask Google what's the difference between a dam and a digital preservation system, it comes up with these two bullet points, which pretty much nails it. Digital asset management typically in the industry is used to talk about how do you manage all the assets that a corporation or a company or an institute might have for all of its marketing materials. and all of those sorts of things, digital content. Very different from a digital preservation system. And yet, if you talk to your IT department or to your consultants about a dam, you're very likely to end up kind of heading down the wrong track. And perhaps to highlight that a little bit, this is another place where we've run into confusion. We think in terms of a collection management system, and amongst ourselves, we call it a CMS. To most of the world, a CMS has got to do with collection management used by website creators, marketers, and so on. And again, dropping this into Google and saying, what's the difference? It told me this, and this nails it. This is absolutely the difference. But if you're talking about a CMS with your IT department, or if you're Googling CMS, you're going to end up in that first camp. And there's likely to be a lot of confusion around this. So we don't use CMS as a way of referring to what we're doing. We use collection management systems rather than shorthand. This next thing, 15 years ago, this was sort of what the map looked like. And this was put together by the Real Story Group. Tony Byrne created this thing. And these are all the software platforms that are out there for what at the time was deemed to be digital asset management. And a number of these products I've worked with in the past. And when you look at this, you see there's no digital preservation systems in here. There's no collection management. There's very few collection management systems in here. It's really digital assets for marketing. And when they updated this year, they made it explicit. This is marketing technology. So if you use terms like CMS, or dams, your IT department will be thinking about this, which is really not where you need to go. So kind of just to summarize this, what we talk about now is we don't talk about needing storage. We say we need preservation storage. The other thing we need, because we're working within a networked environment, is we need network support from our IT department. We want a collection management system. Now, in our case, we implement in Content DM, but I know a lot of places using Vernon. And when we looked at this, we found that we reviewed everything that was kind of in use in New Zealand. And there are a lot of people using Vernon for museums. There weren't too many libraries doing what we were doing. We ended up with Content DM because it's very library centric, but you'll end up using something that works for you. We've tended to call it a collection management discovery system. At the time we were looking to implement Content DM, we also looked at digital preservation systems, and we kind of hoped to find one package that would do everything. But what we discovered is there isn't really a collection management system that does digital preservation as fully as we would want it to. So we split that into two different packages where we've got Content DM, and our next, and you'll see I'll talk about this further on, but the next thing we've got to look for is a digital preservation system. The other thing that is a little bit sobering for us, and depending on the size of the organization you're working in, for Auckland Council, naturally, critical services receive priority. And so that's where there's a threat to life and property, fire, earthquakes, floods, and so on. Our heritage collections are not classified by Auckland Council as critical, although of course they're highly valued. By definition, they're not a high priority for the organization. And I have to say, this has become more so as there's been more ransomware attacks and all those sorts of things where the IT department has really got to focus on protecting the council networks from bad actors. So looking after our heritage collections really is up to us. And you'll see that a lot of what I'm going to talk about now is about how you can go about meeting your digital preservation requirements if you're kind of got to do it pretty much on your own. So the other resource that we've used quite extensively is this one from NDSA. This is really a good tool. We started using it primarily when we were writing business cases to be able to demonstrate that what we needed was kind of unique to the requirements of digital preservation and wasn't already provided by existing software and hardware systems that existed in council. But we've since started to use it pretty much as a kind of checklist. And when you use this, this grid, you don't just have to go level 1, level 2, level 3 in order like that. You can pretty much address each of the little boxes on this grid in, you can get work done in each of these places. So we're pretty much covered off the storage and level 1, know your content. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now, what we've done to look at these two areas of work for digital preservation. So as you would have, if you looked at Val and Michael's presentation, you'll see establishing your current state, figure out what you have and where it is, where are the archival originals, and what are all these files named, and then address the immediate risks. And that's for us hardware failures. So we switched to using a NAS, network attack storage, and dealing with file corruption. So let's dive into that a little bit more. The first thing we did was do an inventory of what we have here at Auckland Libraries. There's been a long history of digitization here. We've got over 30 years of files. Many of those were stored on what are now obsolete carriers, and the naming conventions they used at the time suited the requirements of the day, but certainly don't meet our current standards. So it turned out we had 70 different databases and something in the region of 1.7 million records. I'm going to jump in and look at in detail at some of the issues we covered off. Now, these won't necessarily show up in your collections and your organizations because you may not have a 30-year kind of history behind you. But the workflow in the late 1990s was that prints and negatives were sent out for digitization at an external supplier. The files were delivered back to us on either codec photo CDs or regular CDs, and they actually got sent to customers on those discs as well. When the discs came back, they were stored, they were numbered and stored in drawers, and then the files were copied to folders on the network with the running disk numbers, so that you could always, when you found the file on the network, you could go to the drawer, find the disk, get at the file. There was one big problem with this system, and this is codec photo, the way codec photo CDs were constructed. The way that they made a unique name for photo CDs was that each CD had a unique number, and then the files on the CD were numbered 1 through whatever the size of the file was that you were burning. So the hardware player, you put this in, the software that you looked at it with took the barcode and the generic number to create the unique ID. So as I said, these were copied into folders, and you can see at the bottom of this image, that circle in red, this image was image 68 in folder 26. Now, when these were, the problem with this is that when you move those into their accession folders, you end up with hundreds of files with the same name. So when our first task was to find out what we had, and then it was to actually rename all these files. So we used Visual Basic, put all the file names in a spreadsheet, and the existing file names in their folder and their paths, and then put the accession number in the spreadsheet, and Visual Basic renamed all those files for us so that we could get organized. And of course, we actually are still tracking down orphan files. I think the underlying point here is that you kind of need to get your material organized before you can manage it properly, before you can put it into a system. I know there's a hope that you can drop it into some kind of platform that will help you organize it, but actually you have to get it organized first. So there's no doubt that some small organizations, you know, we're still finding files on the hard drives and all over the place with wonky names. Job number 1 is to get those files named properly and do all that file cleanup. The other thing is that you have to plan for exponential growth. We did a survey about 5 years ago of what we had, and we had about 135 terabytes. That's now double. We've got 266 terabytes or thereabouts. We're managing something like well in excess of 5 million files. And so far only 5% of our photograph collection is digitized. So whatever we do. We have to plan for exponential growth. And we're seeing this particularly with born digital material, where at one time we might get a photo accession, might be a photo album or a collection of photographs that was relatively modest in size. Now, born digital material, we're getting hundreds, if not thousands of files in a single accession. So we expect, whatever we're doing, we have to plan for extraordinary growth. So the approach we took was to, when we first started, everything was just on hard drives and all the files were managed with spreadsheets. So we moved to putting everything on a NAS, and we started with just one NAS, like that one in the top right-hand corner of this slide. The great thing about this system is that it's expandable. You can add more expansion boxes to the NAS. You can put bigger drives in the NAS. And if you're a small organization, this is a good place to start. And what this does is it protects you against drive failure. We have two NASs, they're not connected to each other. One is on the network, NAS 1, and that allows our curators and collection specialists, anybody who needs to work with the files, to be able to get at the files on our network. They only have read access. They can't write to those disks. So that protects, hopefully, from file corruption. And then we've got a third set of files that are in that fireproof safe that you see. That is for offsite storage, so that we've got a set of files in another building in case this building blows up or something catastrophic happens here with the roof falling in or something. This is all a manual process, which is, it works, it's okay, but ideally it would be more automated. But right now, replicating all these files is done manually. But as I say, if you're a small organization, you can start small and expand. If you can get two small NAS boxes and put two sets of files on there, it's quite manageable. The other thing that it does is it gives you software that will monitor the health of the drives for you. So this is what the software looks like for the system we're using. It's checking for malware, viruses, it's checking the health of the disks, it's telling us how much space we have, and that's running 24/7. This is what the disk health report looks like in that software. So this kind of takes care of, from a digital preservation point of view, one big piece of the puzzle is taken care of with having a NAS and having that keeping track, making sure that your drives are healthy, and we get alerted if there's a problem and we can switch the drives out without any loss of data. So what our future planning is here is that what we'd like to see, which is more ideal, is to have one NAS on site, the second one off site, so we get some more geographical separation. And instead of copying things to hard drives in a safe, having our deep storage for disaster recovery cloud-based. And ideally, this wouldn't all be manually done, and we could do this with software, making sure that each of those sets of data are matching. The other thing is that we're basically doing all this from inside our team. We're not using IT to do all this work. We have an arrangement with IT about the pieces they take care of and the pieces we take care of. Our IT department takes care of our network support. They manage the Active Directory, so that lets the curators and the arrangement description team access all of the data that they need to get at, and that's what you see on the right there. It's earlier in the year, that's how many people happen to be online at that moment in time. So this is all stuff we do in our team ourselves. With regard to file management, as I said, it's currently a manual process, and it really splits into two categories here. New digitization, most of which is done in-house, although we also have external contractors who do digitization for us. The standard we use here is FADGI, so incoming files we know are in good shape and meet all of our requirements. Files that we're accessioning from various collections that might come in from a hybrid collection in a an archives and manuscripts collection, or that might come from, someone who's donating their collection to Auckland Libraries and will come on an old hard drive or flash drive or something like that. We will use a write blocker to just make sure that stuff is coming in cleanly to us. We don't use it that often, but we do have that just as a fail-safe. And we also use checksums. We're using Terracopy to make sure that when we're copying over files, there's no degradation in the files as we copy them, which is where most of the problems are going to happen when you're copying files. And we use Excel spreadsheets for logs and tracking. And this, as I said, we're dealing with a lot of files. And so this kind of workflow is something I think that even small organizations could use to get their digital preservation underway. One other thing is that we don't put into our digital preservation workflow any proprietary files, like those files types you see on the right. Those are generated by digital cameras or scanners and so on. We don't really want to have, we're not really resourced to maintain the health and accessibility to those proprietary file types into the future. And we don't want to bury in the archives somewhere a problem for future archivists to have to deal with. So what we do is we convert all those into those raw files into TIFF files. And so we save the TIFF as a preservation master. We then make a modified master if we need to crop it or rotate it or do whatever we need to do to the TIFF. And then from that, we make JPEG files for accessions. If we commission photography, we specify that we want unedited TIFF files to whatever resolution the sensor and the camera will produce, full resolution files. But we don't try and archive raw files. I know some institutions do, but that's kind of a decision we've made to sort of match somewhat what we know we can manage and not take on work that we don't think we can manage. So that's one of the decisions that we've made for Auckland Libraries. So if you go back to this grid, what you see is that we're pretty much able to tick off each of these boxes in each of these areas of digital preservation work. There's more work we can do in each of them, but we're actually pretty much checking off most of these, at least to some degree. A lot of it is done manually, but that's what we can manage. And so that's better to do that than do nothing at all. So that's sort of where digital preservation is up to with Auckland Libraries. Now, if that too hard basket, probably, let's look at that. Our NAS will tell us when a disk goes bad, and that's one that went bad in March of earlier this year. What it won't do is tell us when files are corrupted, which is what you see on the right. So this was a case of where these files, when they were copied over, something went wrong with the copying, and we had a problem with those files. So then we've got to go back and either see if we've got better copies of them or redigitize. In this case, it was something held in our collection. They weren't born digital originals, so we could go back and redigitize if we needed to. But we don't have anything in place that's going to help us monitor the health of the files. So really what we need to do here is, which is the next piece of work that we have to do here at Auckland Libraries, is we've got to invest in some sort of digital preservation system. And as I said, this is not a dam. When you look at what's out there, there's not that much out there. So our next job is to evaluate what's out there and what would be the best fit for us. We would kind of like to use what everybody else in New Zealand is using, but quite frankly, there really isn't a standard platform that everyone here is using. So it'll be just a matter of looking at what seems to be the best fit for us. So that's the next piece of work that we need to do so that we can automate the monitoring of the health of the files. Now, there are some utilities. If you've got a relatively small collection, there are some utilities that you can use to run across your files. You can use Terracopy to check the health of your files. And if you look at the Digital Preservation 101 webinar from Val and Michael, you'll see some recommendations for software there that you can do that with. But for us, with our 5 million plus files, it's really too big of a job. So just to kind of recap of what we have at Auckland Libraries, our collection management system is ContentDM. The back end is where our curators and our collection access management team work, and the front end, of course, is public facing. And so that's governed, material gets into that through collections that are accessioned, and that's governed by collection policies and the metadata standards that are used to create the records. Our imaging system is, we're using Capture One for capture, or we have more digital stuff coming. That's governed by our digitization standards. Digital preservation right now, the two NASs that we have, one that are air-gapped. One is for working files, which is used by a collection specialist, and then a third set of files on hard drives that are offsite. And that's governed by our preservation standards. When something is digitized or it's added to the collections, goes on the NAS, we then attach the files to the database records, and the files are delivered to customers if it's a customer order, if someone's requested something to be digitized. And then we add the link from Cura to our library catalog if it's a published item. And that the point there is that the catalog is the collection management system for all of our published materials. Cura is our collection management system for stuff we've digitized. Now, of course, we can add a lot more detail in ContentDM and Cura because we've got a lot more flexibility with the way that's set up. So if we digitize something that's in the catalog, we put a link, as you see at the bottom of this record, back to the catalog, and we put a link in the catalog directing people to the digitized content. So that gives a certain amount of interoperability between the two. In that case, the collection management system for the printed materials is Sierra, is the catalog. And of course, all of this is in service of making everything available, which is the whole point of the digital preservation workflow, is to make sure all of this content is available. We would like to say in perpetuity. We'll see if we get there, but yes, that's our goal. So that covers off what we've been doing here at Auckland Libraries, and I hope that it gives some idea of what you can do if you're a smaller institution to get started and cover off the basics of digital preservation so that you can feel confident that you're looking after the materials that are in your care. So now questions.
Tim, thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. I found myself nodding along the entire time. And it was just really great to get a behind the scenes glimpse into your workflows and your systems. And I really loved the slide with the NAS set up. And yeah, and it was also really great to just see like questions, because a lot of times the word NAS is thrown around a lot and we don't always know what's meant by that. So it was really great to break it down. So thank you so much. There have been a few questions that have emerged in the chat. There was, again, that sort of discussion of like, what is a NAS, the network attached storage. The other question that came through was if your NAS is using hard drive disks or whether it's using solid state disks, if you happen to know that.
Sorry, say that again.
Oh, it's a question of whether you're using HDD or SSDs in your storage.
Oh yeah, so the NAS comes with both, and these are all the ones we're using as our primary storage in there are HDDs. We've got SSDs in there as well if we wanted to use that for. They're generally used for speeding up the operations in the NAS, but we could use it, for example, as a staging place for incoming files that are yet to be properly accessioned or put into their their final accession folders and so on. So yeah, basically it's HDDs. Yeah. I can run down these questions actually. Do you still keep the raw even if not part of your preservation process? No, we don't. We don't keep those raw files. And Dave, to your question too, it is a bit of a trade-off where we know we're throwing away some stuff by not keeping those raw files. If we had better resourcing, then we would keep them. But it's really to do with matching what our resourcing is and with what we can manage. So it absolutely is a compromise, but we, at this point, I guess trying to keep fidelity to the bits and bytes, and rather than say, how do you just, you've got there, Dave, how do you describe artistic interpretation and post-production? It's partly why when we commission photographer, we ask them to deliver us TIFFs. So the photographer will make those artistic decisions or those kind of aesthetic decisions about how they want to represent the work that they have done for us. And then we receive from them the TIFF file as the finished product. But I completely understand there is a trade-off there, without question. And I see Tegan has asked, do you have any recommendations for preservation file types for video files? You know, as an institution, we're kind of a bit challenged with video because we're not resourced particularly well to either archive video or deliver video. We need a better platform for video, and so we're basically still in discussion about that. We would like, as a collecting institution, to be able to say, if there is some really important video collections out there, we might approach Autonomous Sound and Vision and talk about whether or not it fits their collecting policy better than ours. But at this point, it's somewhat unresolved. So do you do file normalization just for digitized collections, or do you do normalization for accession born digital collections from external donors too? Yeah, we do it for both. Very often what we'll get from born digital collections, we will get the file name that was generated by the camera. And so then we no longer have unique file names. Also, very often, the camera hasn't been set to proper, the date on the camera hasn't been set, so the metadata in there, in those files is very unreliable. So yeah, we do quite a bit of that. We'll, as best we can, extract the technical metadata from the IPTC file, you know, header in the file, and get what we can out of that. But generally, we will always give the file name, the accession number, and the order in which it was captured as the running number. So if there's a particular story to be told by the, you know, the sequencing of the photographs, if we can recreate that, then we will. Just as when we accession slides, we'll try and put the slides into their numbered order before we digitize them and name them, so that we're getting them in sequence. Someone says, Tegan, how do digital preservation systems differ from collection management databases? For me, the kind of thumbnail way of describing this difference is that collection management systems are really recording information about the content. So that's bibliographical metadata, descriptive metadata. Digital preservation systems are collecting metadata about the technical metadata about the file. So it's kind of a distinction between technical metadata and descriptive metadata. And that's a bit kind of oversimplified, but it kind of helps sort of understand the two categories there. One is about the file and one is about the content, as it were. Are those library catalog links added manually? Yes, they are. Yeah, we go and put those in manually. It's not too time consuming. There isn't a huge number of things that what's in CUDA, it tends to be primarily unpublished, but if it's from our published collections, then yes, we put those links in manually. Louise says, you mentioned not finding a CMS option which incorporates digipres management. Are there DAM systems that also include good digital preservation management? If you talk to vendors, they will say yes. Yes, we've got our digital asset management system nails all of the digital preservation things. And a little bit like when you talk to people who are vendors for collection management systems, very often they've added on, because there's such a awareness now of digital preservation, thanks to Val and NDF and everybody else, people are getting much more conscious of it. So you'll find that there are utilities that are kind of bolted on to collection management systems. But now, of course, we were looking, it's almost 7 or 8 years ago now that we did this evaluation of what was in the marketplace, and things have shifted since we did that. And so I wouldn't rule out finding something that can cover all the bases for you. But we certainly found that because the two purposes of the collection management system and the digital preservation system was so different, that it was easier for us to have two different platforms. And in a way, it's two different teams that are working with it. Our collection access and management team are looking after the metadata for the collection management system. Our digital preservation team, i.e. person, is looking after the digital preservation system. So in a way, there are two different workflows there as well. So it kind of makes sense to us to separate. Yeah, so
Yeah, we've
thanks
gotten
for
lots
all
of
the
compliments on the
congratulations
presentation.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really valuable topic, and just really hearing that firsthand experience of what it's been like actually implementing this is incredibly valuable, because it is a challenge for so many organizations, and especially the smaller institutions, as people have pointed out.
Yeah.
Are there any further questions?
Just for show and tell, here's an example, a little box you can attach to your laptop that gives you 2 hard drives. If one fails, the other will be there. You won't lose your data. Really simple to get one of these and plug it in. It's not a NAS. It won't give you all the software work that you can do, but you can get going. You can get started in on it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that, digital preservation has become more prominent in recent years, and there is a really strong community. There's the Digital Preservation Coalition that Tim mentioned in the beginning of his presentation. There's also Australasia Preserves. There's the iPres conference that's going to be happening in Wellington and online in November. And there's lots of people working on digital preservation that you can always reach out to and just ask, how does it work in your organization? So do feel free to get in touch if you have questions. It looks like one more question has come through in the chat.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for programs to help with file renaming or for large numbers of files? We just absolutely love Free Commander. That was recommended to us by Val and Jessica. It must be 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago when you guys did a workshop up here for us. Yeah, there's amazing utility that's built into Free Commander that Google what you can do with it, because there's a lot more than looks on the surface. It's really great for bulk renaming of files, modifying file names. Yeah, Free Command.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. Thank you all so much for attending today, everyone who came along to this webinar. It was great to see such representation from the South Island, from Australia, from around the Motu and beyond. So thank you all so much for attending. An email will be sent out with the recording and links in the next few days. Do make sure that you are signed up to the NDF mailing list for information about our other events and next online sessions. So there's actually 2 more coming up. We have Managing Digital Collections. Actually, there's more than 2 coming up, but the next 2 coming up are Managing Digital Collections, a systems perspective of CMS, DANS, DPS, and TDR from Kirsty Cox at Tapapa. So again, talking about more of those systems and acronyms and unpacking it all. And then another session on oral history collections with Sue Berman and Renee Orr, also from Auckland Council Libraries. And if you really enjoy the kind of content that NDF produces and are keen on getting more involved with NDF, we have board elections coming up in November. So we will post again those links in the chat. We really do. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to Tim. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Val. Thanks, everybody.